Gaywyck by Vincent Verga. Publisher Allison Books, Los Angeles, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 17. Images of Danough and his white captain standing amidst a caterwaul of seagulls stirred my waking moments. Sharp knocking sounded sleepily. I called entry. "Robbie, get up," Mortimer ordered. "We need your smiling presence to the suite." "What's happened?" "The tulips. Someone's decapitated all the tulips." "Oh my God." "And where was Madame God?" "Asleep, obviously, as I was." Danough was very upset. "Cormac, once. I know. I'll be right down." He left, using the portico stairs. I dressed as quickly as I could. If anything spoiled this day with my friends, I would be miserable. By the time I reached the back lawn, a fragile calm had been negotiated. 5 gardeners huddled between the rose trees, silent, bewildered, waiting for orders. Mortimer and Goodbody stood in the library windows, conversing quietly. Keys and Tears sat alone in a garden chair. Halfway down the lawn, Denvers walked with Danough. A white piece of paper flapped in his hand. I noticed the different colored tulip blossom scattered on the trim green. They looked like jewels dumped from Danough's box. Brian called me from the other side of the pleached hawthorns. An eerie, disembodied voice, his. I could barely see him through the tightly knitted, budding branches. "Jones did it. You frightened me. I didn't know you were there. Why are you hiding? Jones is gone." "I know. He told me he was leaving." "He didn't." The pleached tree shook. I half expected his head to burl through. "What a lie. He told me last night, but he never mentioned this." "It's a farewell present." "Charming. How do you know?" He left a note explaining. I looked out at Danough and Denvers. Their white paper simplified matters nicely. I wanted to read it. Mortimer whispered in my ear, "Robbie, dear, why are you gnawing the hawthorns?" "I'm not. I'm talking to Brian." He laughed, beckoning Goodbody. "From over there, it looked as if you were nibbling the leaves. We were worried about you." "Mortimer," Goodbody queried, "is it what we feared?" "No. He claims he was talking with Brian, who has taken to concealing himself. Not that I blame him this morning. Thank you, Brian, for the cookies." There was no answer. "He's gone," I said, peering through the hedges. "Strange boy," Goodbody sighed. "Wouldn't you be?" I snapped, suddenly annoyed. "I'm sorry," Goodbody offered sincerely, making me feel ashamed. "Don't feel ashamed, Robbie." Timothy was behaving insensitively. You were correct to show impatience. I wondered if my emotions were always so transparent. Danough called me. I excused myself from my companions. Denvers passed me, clutching the note, and we nodded at each other without speaking. Danough was walking toward the sea. By the time I reached his side, he was standing pensively among the daffodils. His eyes were dark with rage. He spoke softly. "Let's go for a walk along the beach, Robert." We did not speak until we reached the jetty. "Would you like to swim?" he asked. "No, Danough. The water's too cold for me." "It will warm soon enough," he said, smiling, moving close to put his arm around my shoulder. We turned and walked in the other direction. "Jones left you a note?" I asked. "No. It's addressed to Denvers." "He explains about the tulips?" "No. He never mentions them." "Why?" "Curious." "What does he mention?" "Only that he's leaving." "Didn't he tell you that himself?" "When?" "Didn't he see you before he left?" "No." "Was he supposed to see me?" I related my last conversation with Jones. "I don't understand any of it," he muttered, turning us around to walk again toward the jetty. "Why didn't you write me about him?" "I didn't want to bother you. I imagined we could manage him. I should never have sent him here. It's made things difficult." "It's complicated things." "Were you friendly?" "No, I hated him." Why? He lied about everything. I dreaded becoming involved in some distressing conversation about Jones's fabrications. The tulips had caused enough trouble for one morning. We passed the boathouse. Danough, where are you going? There's someone I want you to meet. Oh, a friend of mine. 4 fishermen sat on the beach, mending their large net torn by a jagged piece of driftwood. Their boat was beached, a little beyond. Seeing Danough, they stood and tipped their caps. We stopped to discuss the damage to their equipment. He asked if the whales had bothered them, remembering a time when a boat had been accidentally overturned and an elderly fisherman drowned. They assured him there had been no problems, except for the critters, eating several tons of their fish. Luckily, it was driftwood in your net, he said as a parting pleasantry, and we all laughed in agreement. We continued on our leisurely way. I needed to ask about his brother's death and other unanswered questions. I wanted to tell him about Cale's disappearance, about his diary, and my watch. But he started humming Una Fativa Lagrina while gulls circled, and I surrendered willingly to the warming day and the pleasures of his company. Falling in with his brisk stride, I accepted the inevitability of only casual exchange. As my blood quickened with the exercise, I thought to tell him of my progress with my physical regimen. Robbie, he interrupted, I've been meaning to talk to you about your mother. Let's sit for a minute. Is there anything wrong? No. We sat on the grass, growing up the dunes. I thought maybe a relapse. I worry. No, I worry too. I did not look at him. Staring at the sea, I searched for dorsal fins. I felt something weighty was about to be dropped. Robbie, how long have you been visiting her? I knew he meant my secret friend. She must have told him. A long time. Months. How'd you find her? Through the closet in the art room. I was searching for misplaced books. I wanted to ask how he knew, but I was ashamed of myself. She told me she enjoys your visits. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth. I studied him. What do you mean? She's my mother. I gasped at him. You told me she was dead. I'm sorry, Robbie, he whispered, looking grief-stricken in the line. You said she was dead, I repeated as an excuse for my not having guessed. I thought she was a foundling like me. You aren't a foundling, he laughed. She speaks of herself in the third person. She thinks everyone is alive. Are they? Is Carmack alive too? No, I swear. Your mother. Why does your mother look like mine? I haven't a clue. Tell me about your mother's past. She was raised a Quaker on a farm near my father. Her parents died soon after they married, and I don't think she had any living grandparents. She never talked about her father. There has always been something furtive in her manner. I guess that's where I get it from. Sneaking around in other people's closets. We both laughed. He took my hand. Her parents are not dead, Robbie. But why? I don't know. Do you mind if I look into all of this? There are too many coincidences. Mind? No, of course not. No? Yes. I'm starving. Good. She'll be delighted. Who? My friend. We continued walking. The day was going to be sublimely beautiful. One of those late spring days presaging summer. He spoke of his mother. Her announced death was the decision of his father. It was cleaner and easier that way. Mental illness bore heavy stigma, and he had done it for his sons as well as for himself. Nothing was to interfere with their making good marriages. Like most wealthy men of his era, fascination with European nobility was awakening. The ideal of his sons as titled gentry motivated him. He wished to keep the family's facade in good repair, although he was wise enough to know the power of his money and aristocratic Europe's tolerance for propriety concealed cracks. The funeral was a simple one. My father loved the theater. He staged the event personally, filling the coffin with stones. About 100 yards ahead, a narrow path appeared in the sand dunes. Danough veered in that direction. We followed the narrow walk as it curved and dipped, then climbed into a small wood. I could hear children laughing. Before us, in a clump of daffodils, a young boy sat holding a green ball. Behind him, 2 young girls were skipping rope, counting each turn. An unadorned 1-story stone house with an ivy-colored slate roof appeared at a bend where the path widened into a cultivated yard filled with unmolested tulips. In front of the cottage's open door, a tiny child was curled up asleep in a puddle of sun. "Is this a school?" I asked, charmed. "The best in the world," he whispered, approaching the door, grinning and slightly flushed. We stepped over the threshold. The cottage was tiny. From the central doorway, we could see the bedroom to the right and the parlor to the left, with the kitchen behind it. The rooms were simply but elegantly furnished, with lustrous, sturdy wooden furniture, piled high with brightly covered cushions and cluttered with beautiful figurines of delicate china. A dodo decorated the 4 parlor walls. The lower half greens, the upper periwinkle blue. In the kitchen, by the open back door, an old woman sat rocking a sobbing child, all the while making sweet, comforting sounds. The child calmed, slid from her lap, and ran in our direction. "My Daddy!" the old woman exclaimed. "Is it really you?" "Yes, Nanny, it's really I." I remembered everything about our first visit to Nanny Wells in particular. I remembered the change that overtook Danough in her loving presence. He was relaxed and loquacious. He was sweety, childlike, and with attitudes I cannot describe precisely, smiling radiantly. She rose and hurried towards us. She was very old and seemed no larger than a child herself. We both towered over her. When he introduced us, I could hear in his voice how important this occasion was to him. Perhaps that is what I mean by childlike. His thoughts and feelings seemed transparent. "Hello, Robert," she greeted me with a sing-song Irish brogue. "I'm ever so glad to be finally making your acquaintance. Donnie's been talking of little else but the good fellowship at Gaywyck since you came there. Thank God. I say, and you were right about the face, Donnie." "The face?" I asked, confused. "Have you lads eaten?" We said no. "Then follow me into the kitchen and I'll remedy that." The face, I thought. Not just the eyes. The face? "Thou art thy mother's glass, and she's in thee," calls back the lovely April of her prime. We sat in the kitchen at a large round oak table, and she prepared a huge breakfast of porridge, eggs, bacon, blood, pudding, scones, jam, and tea. "I prefer this tea to any other, Donnie," she announced, pouring a cup before sitting beside him. "It's from County Kerry. You said, did you not?" "Well, Nanny, actually, I said the man who sells it is from County Kerry." "I don't think tea grows in Ireland," I said imperturbably. She looked appalled. I was willing to compromise. "I can tell you've never been to Ireland," she said. "Everything grows in Holy Ireland." I apologized profusely, admitting I had never been abroad. She seemed appeased and instantly took me into her confidence. "I come from Ireland, Robert, dear, and I know much of the sainted place. It's coming up 50 years since I emigrated, and I miss it as if it was but yesterday. If Nanny had her way, every house would have a dado like hers to sing the praises of Ireland. It was the first thing I did upon arrival at Gaywyck. I painted Ireland in the nursery. No place ever needed it more. And threw away all the mousetraps." "How old were you?" "Nanny Cruikshank was with us nearly 4 years. When I think," Nanny Wells began, stopped, shook her head, and resumed sipping her tea. "What happened?" "My father dismissed her. I wanted more information, but he changed the subject rather than risk disturbing Nanny Wells further with unpleasant memories. Why did I know nothing of this woman beyond her delight in one of the whimsical boats built for the pond? Was she dismissed because of the mousetraps? I asked on the walk home. Did you complain? No. I wasn't quite 4 and had no idea Nanny Crookshanks wasn't the way of the nursery world. Well, how did Nanny Wells come here? Did your father know you were unhappy? No, when we saw Mama and Papa, we didn't want to talk about awful things like Nanny Crookshank. We wanted to be happy with them. Besides, they were very distant from us then, especially Mama. She was a great beneficent soul who was fun to be with and who put lots of butter on our bread and gave us cake and jam. Once she stuffed Cormac with macaroons and made him sick. Nothing like that ever happened with Nanny Crookshank. Mama had no power over us. No power over anything. We knew it. Nanny knew it. She was often savage and brutal without worry of reprisals. Why didn't somebody do something? You don't understand, Robert. We weren't people. We were children. Toys. Showpieces, as children in wealthy families tend to be. In mid-afternoon on Sundays and on Wednesdays, we were brushed and scrubbed and properly dressed for a presentation at tea in the adult world of shiny mahogany that smelled of beeswax and flowers. Few suspected how ill Mama was. For us, she became a goddess, the antidote to Nanny Crookshank. So, how did your father find out about the mousetraps? The mousetraps were the least of it. They were benign. Unless provoked, Nanny Crookshanks beat us for no reason at all. There were literally dozens of rules to be obeyed, some invented solely to justify a punishment. Silence at all meals, no playing on Sunday or for 1 hour after eating, no books except for special permission. Please, thank you, may I, yes. Nanny Crookshank. No, Nanny Crookshank. I'm sorry, Nanny Crookshank. Forgive me, Nanny Crookshank. She set timetables that had to be followed precisely. She had converted the nursery into a prison. So uncomfortable, so impossible. An environment that I honestly don't know how we survived it. She was a Calvinist from Scotland. She stood 6 feet tall. Was as thin, as quick as a switch. She was superstitious. And gloomy, dour at best, telling us tales of terror that provoked monstrous nightmares. One tale of a butcher who made meat pies from the tails of naughty little boys still makes me sick. Cormac insisted he wanted to be good, so his tail would grow big and strong and hairy like father's. She beat him and dressed him in a shift, forcing him to stand in a corner for a whole day. She professed tremendous love for us and repeatedly reminded us that her actions were to prevent our heads getting swollen, or becoming spoiled, or being show-offish. I had never seen Danough so volatile. He slowed his walk and frequently stopped, accompanying his story with wild gesticulating. She hated Cormac. He radiated a sensuality, a physical energy that she feared. She hated him for it and for the contempt he never hesitated to display. She rarely let him out of her sight. She never rewarded him. She would rage and then beat him for raging. She would discipline him by holding his head in the lavatory and pulling the chain, or by shaking him violently to rattle the devil out of him, or by screeching at him and dragging him around the room by the arm, knocking him into furniture. Danough was shaking. His voice had gotten dark, husky, as though strafed by the weight of his words. At tea, she took the best cakes for herself. She wanted us to eat nothing but starches and rice pudding twice a day, no fruits, no vegetables, no lean meats. They were not intended for children, she'd say. To this day, I cannot bear to be in the same room with ricery pud. Eat it, she'd shriek. Eat it up, or you'll have it for dinner. And again for breakfast. And again until it's moldy and we use up all the agains in the world. Cormac would steal the food off my plate, leaving his unfinished. And then he'd laugh while she shouted her agains and agains and disciplined him. She always answered to a higher authority. I took his hand. Once, when she was shaking him, he bit her ear. She made his nose bleed. Once he hid under the bed, she prodded him out with the hot poker and washed his mouth with brown soap. He started blowing bubbles from his nostrils. When I laughed, she turned and punched me in my chest. He picked up the poker and threatened to kill her if she ever made me cry again, and another time he played with the poker after she had ordered him not to touch it. She heated it and forced him to grab it. She was mad, I exclaimed angrily. Cormac always took the psychic brunt of her. I'm stronger than you, he'd say, comforting me when the lights were out. She abused us continually. I pretended it wasn't happening, or fantasized a world without her. Cormac fought against it. I had frightful nightmares. He would cradle me in his arms to quiet me. I would spend afternoons in terror of the approaching night. Couldn't anyone hear you? We were in a separate part of the house. In the rooms above you, a nursery world apart from everything else. I always believed we were responsible for our troubles. Whatever they were our own fault. She repeated ad infinitum that children are born evil and need to be shown to the righteous path, and how some never could be. Some were damned from the beginning. Who knew otherwise? We believed her. How were you freed of her? He sighed and detoured toward the dunes. I sat beside him, sliding down the hills. I rested my head in his lap. She hated everything, but she hated two things in particular. She hated sensuality, and she hated dirt. All sensuality was evil, and only for the married. The magic of that ceremony somehow made the abominable bearable, but only for God's purpose of procreation. I was not yet 4 when she tied my hand behind my back for immodesty, handling myself. She once tied Cormac's hands to the bedstead because she was convinced he was up to no good at age 3.5. Then dirt. All of the bodily functions came under that heading. Dirt was for the chamber pot. The article, as she always called it. We had a flush toilet, but she preferred the article because she could watch us perform the rite. Every morning after breakfast, we had to move our bowels. Is this upsetting you? Only because it's upsetting you. You're certain? Yes, please go on. For 1/2 hour, we would be forced to sit. If nothing happened, with 1/2 hour off before another half hour on this article, then it was syrup of figs or Gregory powder. Occasionally, she would make us sit bottoms numb until something happened. When she grew impatient, she'd force her fingers inside us to make certain we weren't hiding anything from her. Or she'd grease her thumb and use it as a suppository when she wasn't slamming the actual thing up. Or she'd give us an enema with hot, sudsy water. Cormac considered that it was one of the reasons he was the way he was. Like everything else, I accepted it and did my damnedest to oblige. He finally found a solution. What did he do? He started hoarding. I assumed I'd misheard him and asked him to repeat himself. I had not misheard. Do you want me to stop? No, I want to hear everything now. Actually, it was the only way. The woman was obsessed. He stored them. Where did he store them? How? It was wonderfully simple. Whenever something happened, we would bring her the article for her to see and approve before emptying the pot into the toilet. Cormac swiped one of the large nursery jars and put it on the roof outside the laboratory window. Instead of flushing, you saved for less fertile times. Yes. And during your half hour off the pot? Yes. All right. Now, how does this combine with sensuality to get her dismissed? One summer afternoon, we all went on a family outing, a picnic, if you will. Nanny, of course, brought the article. A little while before that, I don't remember when exactly, but not more than a few weeks, she sealed each of us into a German corset to prevent our handling ourselves with evil intent. What were they like? Of course, his was a metal suit of armor designed for precocious little boys. I don't believe it. It's true. They were quite popular. And for 4-year-olds, that's precisely what my father said. On top of everything else, they were damned uncomfortable. One could not sit without feeling clasped, more like bitten. My father asked why I was standing idly, not playing or reading. Reading at 3? We both read at 3. Papa taught us. If you don't stop interrupting, I shall never finish. There's so much I want to know about you. We have eternity, Robbie. I know, but I'm impatient. Don't be. Where was I? Reading at 3. Actually, you mentioned before that she wouldn't let you read. I didn't pick it up then. Yes, reading, or rather not reading. Papa asked Nanny why she hadn't brought any books, and Cormac said we weren't allowed to read all month. I don't remember why. Not allowed to read? He shouted. It's not good for young boys. It gives them bad ideas, she replied. Better bad ideas than no ideas, Nanny. She ignored his tone and started unpacking. Out came the article. What's that thing doing out here? He boomed, still angry about the books. They must have behaved themselves, Mr. Gaylord. I only want them to be good. She only wants us to be dead, Cormac said aloud to me. Papa glared at him, then reached across the blanket and tugged him into his arms. I thought Papa was going to spank him. I moved to defend, but Papa grabbed me too and hugged us very hard. Try to spank us, Cormac taunted. Papa squeezed us and felt the chastity belts. He asked what we were wearing. Nanny told him. He became enraged. I'll never forget his screaming. Self-pollution at age 4? You must be daft. I remembered it was a hot day. He took off all our clothing and let us run naked in the tall grass. When we returned to the blanket, she was gone. We never saw her again. This morning, I could still hear Crookshank calling Cormac a mean, selfish liar who would burn in hell for all eternity, and I could hear him speaking of himself in the third person, the way he did when he was upset. He's no good. Why can't he be good like Donnie? Or he's hungry and he's tired. It breaks my heart to this day. He soon forgot all about Nanny Crookshank. I brooded and brooded. He flung himself into whatever was next. I always held back, preferring the fear. I knew to the fear of the unknown. I took after my mother, I think. I remember one afternoon in Manhattan, when we were 13, she was better, and we took the sled across 23rd Street to see the Statue of Liberty's arm in Madison Square Park, where it was set up as an attraction. Papa was on a committee to have the statue assembled on Bedloe's Island and had helped to have the huge copper arm brought from Philadelphia to generate some interest in liberty enlightening the world. We walked around the arm and climbed the spiral staircase to the torch. Mama glanced around at all the people, obviously threatened by the multitude. It was a glorious day. The crowd was milling in the park and shopping on the Ladies' Mile. It will become a beacon to the world, Papa was saying. It will welcome all the immigrants and become a great symbol of liberty and justice for all. Would you give all of these people complete freedom? They all look so strange and different. There are only 2 kinds of people, my dear, those who love and those who do not. Everyone is equal and everyone is extraordinary. I know what you mean, and I think it's all nonsense. We set the standards, we make the rules, and then we claim them either. God's will or nature's way. Rubbish. Every individual is entitled to his or her personal freedoms, to live as he or she desires. I am free to disagree, of course. Being Irish and Catholic, you can't but do otherwise, nor can you ever be free to do anything. Father always said Mother broke, because she wouldn't bend to the storms of the human heart. Everything was always so simple for him, and for Cormac too. What about male and female, I asked. There are more similarities than differences. Mama tutted in disgust and descended to the sled. She was silent the rest of the day. She was always the pragmatist, my mother. When I asked her where we came from, she said she bought us at Tiffany and Company. I guffawed. He joined me. You were never cherubs? Oh, of course, but whenever we misbehaved, she couldn't very convincingly threaten to send us back to heaven. After a pause, he added, Papa always said there would be less confusion between the sexes if Shakespeare were taught in grammar school. That was Nanny Wells' genius, I think. She never expected anyone to be what he was not. She always let us be ourselves, and didn't try to mold us into her own image. That isn't loving the other person. She'd say, that's only loving the part of ourselves we find in them. Cormac comprehended all of it. He was wise and passionate. I was always reserved and temperate. He understood instinctively the tyranny of love. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.